Chapter 5 of When Woman Proposes by Anne Warner. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Jen Broda. Chapter 5 The Dawn of Serious Consideration. Mrs. Dupre sat in the window at the end of the room, embroidering. Captain Mowbray lay in a long invalid chair, which had been so arranged that the fresh June air, but not the sparkling sunlight, was freely his. The bandages were gone from his head. Only an oblong piece of black sticking plaster covered the upper part of his left temple. His arms were folded reposefully on his bosom. His long figure was draped in an inner cross lounging gown of some Eastern silk and linen weave, and he was, take it all in all, the picture of an absolute perfect convalescence, lying in the midst of wishes fulfilled. Natalie, in the primmest of blue silk waists and cloth skirts, sat in the immediate vicinity of the invalid chair. "I believe," said the captain, turning his head to another position upon the pillow that was skillfully buckled to just the most right and comfortable spot upon the chair back. "I believe that the interdiction is now removed, and that I may resume the power of speech." As in turning his head, he had turned it so that he looked directly at Natalie. That young woman at once appropriated his question unto herself, and answered promptly, "Yes, you may talk, but you must not talk more than an hour. The doctor said that you might talk for an hour today, though of course he meant that I could talk part of the hour." He smiled a little at that. "I shall attempt to remember," he said, "and I believe that it will be very easy, for what I want to do is to ask some questions, and after each there will be long stretches during which I shall only be too content to be quiet and listen to the answers." "That will be nice," said Natalie, "for I love to answer by the hour." She paused for a few seconds and then said, "What is it that you want to know first?" "How long have I been ill?" 3 months and a little more. "It's a long time, isn't it?" she sighed. "But it's been such fun taking care of you," she added in sudden joyous recollection. "I don't know how I can ever repay you for all your kindness," he said slowly. "In fact, you know as well as I do that nothing can ever repay such kindness. I shall never even be able to find suitable words to express what I feel about it all." "Oh, never mind anything about that," she broke in, becoming suddenly pink with an especially vivid reoccurrence to conventionality. "The doctor said that nothing must disturb you, and trying to say things that you cannot think of is always so hard. You are to have everything bright and cheerful and nothing distressing, and all this—" "Do you think all this, as you call it, is distressing?" he asked with a little amusement. "No, but it's distressing me, because all we did we so wanted to do, and it was a pleasure to do, and you didn't die in the end, and that has been such a joy. And really I am the one to be grateful." Mrs. Dupre coughed ever so slightly. "You are surely very good to take that view," said Mowbray simply. And then after a little he went on to another question. "I presume that there is a great deal of mail for me somewhere." "Stacks," she replied, "but you can't have any of your letters until next week. The doctor said you couldn't be agitated." Mowbray turned his head slightly upon the pillow. "I hope that you don't mind?" she asked anxiously. "Not at all. But the letters could not agitate me. I have no family, and I have long since grown used to seeing my intimates detailed somewhere else." Natalie suddenly leaned forward. "Do please tell me something," she asked. "Why didn't you ever marry? Ever since I first saw you I have been wondering that." Mrs. Dupre coughed somewhat more distinctly. Mowbray smiled broadly. "I never could afford to marry," he said bluntly. "I've no private fortune." "Oh, you don't know much of army life, I take it?" "Only you." "There is quite a bit of it beside. If you knew more about it, you'd know that it isn't a bed of roses for a woman when she has nothing besides her husband's pay to live on." He turned his face away from her for a minute, and then he turned it back again. She was looking earnest, but very puzzled. "I thought that all girls liked to marry into the army," she said. "The beginnings of most things are simple, and of many very pleasant," said the captain. "Nevertheless, I think that when it comes to discussing the lot of a soldier's wife, I may speak with some authority." "But I would believe you anyway," she interrupted. He could not forbear a smile of flashing sympathy. "Thank you," he said. "You see, as a woman, you ought to take an interest, because I have rather dedicated myself to bettering the army woman's lot. I've seen so much of its hard side." "Oh, are you trying to better something?" said Natalie. "How interesting. I have always wanted to do good myself, but the people I know only give teas. Of course, I sign all the papers they bring for money, always, but it isn't like a real man looking right at you and trying to do good, is it? Please tell me all about it." Again she leaned forward, all her attention fixed upon his face. "Natalie," said Mrs. Dupre from her seat by the window, "you must not lead the captain on to talk too much." "I am not leading him on," retorted Natalie. "He is lying just as still as ever." "She is not tiring me," said the invalid. "Instead, she is inspiring me with more and more strength to ask questions." "Oh, I thought that it was you who were going to tell me things," she said. "Well, what is it that you want to know next?" "What I want to know most of all is something that I could hardly expect you to be able to tell me." "Ask. Perhaps Catherine will know if I don't." "There was a bill about the army pay coming up just when—" "Did you have anything to do with that bill?" Her eyes opened widely as she spoke. "Yes, it was that which brought me here." He paused, but she was silent. "Ah, I see that it was defeated," he added. "Yes, it was," she admitted frankly. "Natalie!" cried Mrs. Dupre. "I did not startle him, Catherine. He guessed it himself." Her tone was contrite, then quickly. "But it really wasn't exactly defeated. It was laid over or put aside or whatever it is that they do that is perfectly polite and ends things. They did just the same thing with the labor bill last week. The papers have been full of it." Mowbray was still for a few minutes, his lips tightly compressed. "The labor bill deserved better treatment," he said finally with a sort of bracing up. "Didn't yours deserve better treatment too?" He smiled. "That is, of course," he answered and closed his eyes for a minute or two before opening them, with a smile that was very fine under the circumstances. "Now tell me what else has happened during the 3 months. Don't hesitate. I am prepared for any worst." "There isn't anything very bad. Just a king is dead, and Russia is awful as usual, and... Oh, yes, since the labor bill went over, there have been strikes, and in some places they are afraid there may be real riots." "That's terrible," said the man gravely. "The world's in a sad way, isn't it?" "Yes," said his companion cheerfully, "but so much is always in a sad way." He had to smile as he looked at her. "Which are you?" he asked. "Thoughtless or a philosopher?" She turned two startled eyes upon him. "I don't know. I never thought about it. One reads such things so often in the papers. One only thinks of them as stories." "Yes, I know," said Mowbray. "We forget that they're real. The part that is true in those newspaper stories. I'm very much the same, I suppose, and I suppose also that we ought to be very thankful for our inability to realize what is true." She frowned a little in the fervor of her attention, and then she nodded. "Yes, of course we ought to be grateful that we cannot realize it. But why do you say that you are the same as everyone else? You're not the same. You're different. I saw that the very first day." Mrs. Dupre coughed, but her friend went straight on. "And seeing how different you were made me want to be different too. I want you to teach me to be different, just in the same way that you are." "How different?" asked the officer. To what kind of degree of variation do you aspire? I want to do better and to do good. It is just as I said before. I want to help on things. You know the feeling. Francis Mowbray turned his head away, and something like a sigh passed over his lips. I am not given to introspection, but do I know the feeling? He said. I wonder. Yes, you know it, said Natalie in her tone of conviction. You know that you help. You know why you came here. It wasn't for any selfish purpose, surely. The first time that I saw you, you were not enjoying yourself. You were standing there looking at the others and thinking. You were not thinking about yourself either. One could see that. I could see it plainly. After I had stood and watched you for a while, I felt as if I knew you. And as soon as I felt that I knew you, I did not want to speak to one single other person. It seemed as if it would be a dreadful waste of time, so I just went upstairs again and— Whatever does ail you, Catherine? For Mrs. Dupre was all but strangling, apparently. I'm all over it now, she said faintly. Where was that? Asked Mowbray, referring to what went before the interruption. It was at a reception the very afternoon before your accident. You stood by a pillar with your arms folded, just as you have them now. It's impossible to tell you how you looked. Oh, I've never seen any man look so. I was coming down the staircase when I first saw you, and Natalie, called Mrs. Dupre in a most imploring voice, won't you come here and see if you can find my skein of black silk? Natalie rose and moved towards her friend. It is all just as I am telling it, isn't it, Catherine? You saw him standing by the pillar, too? And, why, here's your black silk just where it always is. She took it up in great surprise. Thank you, dear, said Mrs. Dupre sweetly. Remember not to talk too abstruse subjects to an invalid. She is not tiring me, said the captain. No, indeed, I'm not, said Natalie, returning at once to her seat by the long chair. The doctor allowed him an hour anyway, and it isn't half that yet. You were saying, he reminded her. I don't know what I was saying. Oh, yes, I do. I was talking about how you looked that first day. Do you know it seemed to me that you looked another way, too? Have you always looked that other way, too? What other way? The way you look sometimes now, times when you are not talking. Perhaps I am stupid, but I don't quite grasp your meaning. Can't you go a little more into detail? Natalie considered. As if life didn't matter very much to you, so far as your own self were concerned, she said at last. He laughed shortly. It is fortunate that the privilege of looking exactly as we feel is denied the most of us. But I'm afraid that personally, I've been betrayed the state of my own case only too clearly. You see, it's a straight and narrow path, my profession. No accidental sidelights or chance of prizes, even if one is willing to work for them. No especial glory as the game is going just now. No particular hope for the immediate future. Very little to count on oneself. Nothing to offer another. He stopped there, and his eyes went straight to hers, and then straight away again. Then something seemed to force him out into the open, even though the ground was all new. I suppose this is hearsay that I'm talking, but you see, I know it all by heart. It isn't hearsay with me. It's daily life. I've stayed single simply to be spared the agony of self-reproach. And I'm going to stay single. He stopped short, perhaps conscious of being altogether too far out upon the unmapped ground. Go on, said Natalie, her eyes fairly luminous with interest. Don't stop there. I want to know why you're going to stay single. It interests me ever so much, more than you can possibly think. Please go on. But it isn't interesting, said Mowbray. On the contrary, it's selfish, almost sordid. And yet, it isn't really for myself that I care. It's only that I'm afraid to undertake a battle that strength and courage won't count in. You see, as a single man, I'm fairly well off. My reasonable wants are provided for, and my efficiency as an officer is not impaired by money considerations. But as a married man, without any outside resources— But of course you're not interested in all this, and I don't blame you if you haven't listened to any of it after the first 10 words. He stopped suddenly again. But I am interested, she cried. I've listened, and I've understood. Was that all in the bill? It wasn't worded in just that way. Do you know, I think I could understand a great deal more if you would trouble to tell me. She rose and went to the bell as she spoke. It's time for your eggnog, she remarked parenthetically as she did so. Natalie, do let Captain Mowbray rest. It was Mrs. Dupre's voice. Yes, while he has his eggnog, answered Natalie. He is being quiet now, and I'm going to screw on his table and turn it just right. That is always such fun. I believe that you regard me as a mechanical toy, said the officer, laughing. What will become of me when I fall back into my old life at the post? She was stooping at his side table to slip the table supports into their rightful slots. I don't know, she said, a little faintly. Then, as she recovered an upright position, she added, I can't imagine you anywhere except just here. He opened his lips impulsively, then closed them. Mrs. Dupre coughed slightly. No one spoke for a little, and then a servant entered with the eggnog, daintily set out on a tray of crystal rimmed in silver. You can eat alone now, can't you? Natalie said, as she watched the arranging of the little table. I used to want to feed you myself, but the nurses always took everything away from me. Nurses are so disagreeable when you want to take care of someone yourself. The captain took up his spoon and looked hard at the monogram engraved upon its bowl. You have really been very interested in my case, haven't you? He said, and then, as if to forestall her reply, he went on hurriedly. But what an absurd remark for me to make. The fact that I am here and have been for 3 months, and that I am alive to give expression to my gratitude and appreciation and— He stopped. She was watching him with parted lips and eager eyes. Somehow he suddenly was conscious of a very unpleasant mental sensation, as if some unknown, unmeasured shadow was creeping up out of their horizon. Aren't you going on? She asked. Or are you afraid the eggnog is getting flat? The eggnog must not be allowed to get flat, he said, and dipped the spoon into the glass. It seems like a dream to see you sitting almost straight up and able to feed yourself without spilling, she said after a minute or two. It has all seemed like a dream, he answered. Some of it was a pretty bad dream, too, but the awakening was the most dreamlike of all. I mustn't qualify it as good or bad. It is enough that it will remain a dream till the end. It's awfully nice of you to feel so, said Natalie. I've wondered sometimes, since my brain began to work again, just why you did it. Why should you have taken me under your roof? Why should you have given an utter stranger such care and comfort and consideration? One seeks in vain for a motive. Why, I did not think anything about it, cried Natalie. Of course they carried you in here because it was the nearest house, and of course when I saw who it was, I kept you. Mrs. Dupre coughed. The captain's eyes wandered towards her at her place in the window. She seemed to be interwoven with that shapeless shadow on the horizon. I will tell you what inspired you, he said, putting the spoon aside with a sudden air of weariness. You saw what you conceived to be a duty, and that duty you performed to the slightest detail with scrupulous and conscientious exactitude. I never thought anything about a duty, asserted Natalie. If it had been any other man, I should have telephoned for the ambulance directly. He felt a species of smile wrung from him. Natalie, said Mrs. Dupre, ring for the captain's tray to be taken. Yes, Catherine, she obeyed as she spoke. The idea of your troubling so much over it all, she said as she resumed her seat. It isn't worth your bothering. Truly and honestly, I never have been the 10th part so happy in all my life. The servant coming in for the tray interrupted her speech. Mrs. Dupre coughed some more, too. "I shall remember it all after I get back to my post," the captain said quietly. "There will be days and days and nights for all that." She looked at him, and a little line of pain formed between her eyebrows. "Do I sound too grave and serious?" he asked, smiling. "No, I like it. It is so new to me, you know. I have never been used to being serious myself. But just at first, perhaps, it is a little hard to live up to. And besides," she hesitated, then in a burst of confidence, "I know you must go there, but I don't one bit enjoy hearing you talk about being back at your post and your duty." Mowbray was silent. Turning his sense of vision within, he asked himself what was that rising gloom upon their sunlit friendship, and left her to develop the next conversational phase alone. "But won't you go on, please? I want to learn to understand when you say grave and serious things. Even if I appear foolish, I can learn. I'm going to learn, too. I read once that nothing developed anyone like a fixed purpose, and I have a fixed purpose." "Have you really a fixed purpose? It is so easy to have a purpose, but so hard to fix it sometimes." "Mine is as fixed as fate," she declared. "It is going to succeed, too. When I make up my mind about anything, it always succeeds." "I wish that I might be with you long enough to arrange a few matters of public and private interest then." "What do you want arranged?" He could not but smile afresh at her air of complete competence. "My army bill," he said promptly. "That is public. What do you want arranged privately?" She leaned forward. He shifted his position. "It will seem heartless and ungrateful to say it," he said in a low tone. "You have been so kind, so all that is angelic. But I want to get away. I want my strength again. I want to return to my work. I have failed here, you know. Well, I want to get back where I am needed and where I won't fail, because success only depends on my own doing of my own duty. And, oh well, I can't explain, but I must get away." Then he saw the shadow that was haunting him, and putting a bitter tinge upon his restlessness, began to creep over her face, too. "I always forget that you have work to do anywhere," she said a little sadly. "I suppose it is very upsetting somewhere for you to be ill. Who walks up and down in your place while you are here?" "The next in command does my walking until I report for duty again." "I know so little about the army," she meditated. "If you had died, what would have happened? Would they have all moved up one?" "Yes, all below me would have been advanced." "Doesn't that seem very heartless?" "Not as heartless as it would seem if they all went down a peg." "No, I suppose not." She paused and looked thoughtful. "I wish you would tell me something," she said then. "Anything you like." "You said that you had never married because you couldn't afford it. Shall you ever be able to afford it, do you think?" "Natalie, it is getting time to leave Captain Mowbray to rest," said Mrs. Dupre suddenly. "Not for 10 minutes yet," answered her young friend. The captain compressed his lips. "A year ago, I should have answered that I thought not," he said slowly. "What do you think now?" "I think I'm too old." "How old are you?" Mrs. Dupre coughed loudly. "Why don't you sit further back from that window, Catherine?" Natalie asked irritably. Then she looked expectantly at the officer. "You don't mind telling me your age, do you?" she questioned in afterthought. "No, not at all. I'm too old to mind. I'm 41. "I don't think that that is too old to marry." Mrs. Dupre coughed again. "Thank you, but I do," said Mowbray. "And I'm too poor in any case," he added. "How poor are you?" "Natalie," cried Mrs. Dupre desperately, "can you see the clock?" "Oh, it isn't the time yet." "I have 3,000 a year," said the interrogated. His hearer quite jumped in her chair. 3,000 for the whole year?" she cried. He was obliged to smile audibly. "That's what I said." "But you're over 40. "Yes, unfortunately." "Didn't you ever have any more?" "No, only less." Her face was full of sympathetic distress. "Then if you married, your wife would have but 3,000 to live on?" His smile broadened. "She wouldn't have even that. I should always require some small portion of it for myself." She sat as if in a dream for a long half-minute. "No, you could never, never marry," she said at last, with a positiveness that was final. "Goodness me! Why, if that's all that the captains get, what do the lieutenants live on? I know girls who have married lieutenants." "Yes, I do too," replied the officer. "I have even lived at the same posts with some. And, looking on at the results, I have never been able to see how it was all to come out. Of course, two people, each with a complete new outfit of clothes, can get along very cheaply for a year or two. But if there is a baby, and there generally is a baby, and they hope ever to educate it, and most people look forward to educating their children, you know, then it follows that the pinching has got to begin right from the very start." "Even then I don't see how they manage," said Natalie. "Their relatives must have to help them." "That's no very pleasant outlook for a self-respecting man." Natalie paid no attention to his remark. "I think that something ought to be done," she announced slowly and with great decision. "Of course something ought to be done," said Mowbray. "Don't I lie here helpless as an evidence of how much I personally desire to see something done? I should never be here if I had not come on about that bill. That was my testimony to my own conviction that something not only ought to, but must be done. Merely refusing to drag any more human beings into the swamp of straitened circumstances is only a negative manner of helping out the bad situation. The real help must come from the government." "I should think that there would have been a lot of dissatisfaction when the bill was put aside," said Natalie. "There probably was," said the officer dryly. "But any governmental action catches the Army squarely in a vice between its patriotism and its duty. However, you may be quite sure that there was dissatisfaction. I can certify to that, even if I haven't been able to see any of the papers lately." "There was plenty of trouble when the labor bill didn't pass anyway," said Natalie. "There were columns and columns about it. Mr. Lefevre came here 3 times. I saw his picture in the telegram. He didn't look at all like his caricatures. He looked ever so pleasant. I liked his face tremendously." "Not many people look like their caricatures," said Mowbray sententiously. There was a pause. "I wonder how it will all come out," Natalie said finally. "I wonder too," said the captain. She leaned her elbow forward on her crossed knee, supported her chin amid her outspread fingers, and stared steadily at the floor. "I wonder," she said after a while, "who will be the one to help most? Ever so many will help, you know, but some one person will come forward and help most. When big things happen, it is always some one person who does the most." The officer said nothing. "You tried to help, didn't you?" she questioned. "In my humble way, yes." "And you failed?" "Yes." "And Mr. Lefevre tried?" "Yes, he tried too." "And failed too. Don't you think that it is strange when everyone knows what should be done, and that it is right to do it, that government will not do it?" "All thinking people think that that is strange," said Mowbray. "But you see, government is too strong to be compelled to listen to reason." "But if the trouble keeps on, and the strikes spread and spread?" "Even then government will be strongest, because it will have the law at its back, and behind the law stands the armed force of the country." "You mean the army?" "Yes." Natalie was silent. After a while she lifted her head. "I have never told you anything about myself, have I?" she asked suddenly. "Very little." "You know that I married?" "Yes." "Shall I tell you all about it? It's quite interesting." I shall be charmed. It isn't very long, neither the story nor the marriage either. I was a widow before 9 o'clock on the evening of the day that I was married. But no one woke me up to tell me so until next morning. I was at school, you see, and I had gone to my room when the telegram came, so they let me sleep until the regular dressing bell in the morning. The principal didn't believe in having the girls disturbed unnecessarily. A very sensible rule, said Mowbray, shifting his position so that he could watch her more easily. He was a very rich old gentleman. He was my grandfather's most particular friend. They had always been in business together. They owned blocks and lots and stocks together. They were partners. I understand. He was very fond of my grandfather, ever so much fonder than he was of his own relatives. He had ever so many relatives, and he didn't like them at all. I quite understand. But he always liked me. I quite understand. Mrs. Dupre cleared her throat. He began to have apoplexy when he grew very old, and he had 2 strokes. You know, one can't have but 3. Yes, I know. And he had gout and was shut up upstairs in his house for months, and nobody really expected that he would ever come downstairs again, so I don't very much blame his relatives myself. What did they do? They began to take what they wanted from downstairs, sets of Dickens with Crookshanks illustrations, and Moorish bronzes, and things like that. Mowbray nodded understandingly. They thought that he would never know, because he would never be coming downstairs again. But towards spring, he grew better, and he came downstairs. She paused expressively. What happened? He was so angry that he nearly had the 3rd stroke. He took his brougham and came to see Grandfather at once, and he told him that he should make it the sole purpose of his life from then on to get even with his relatives. They sent for the lawyer that very afternoon, and the lawyer said that there were 2 ways out of it. He could marry or deed away all his property. They talked it all over, and then he decided that he would make everything absolutely safe by doing both. Then he asked if he could marry me. I was away at boarding school. You see, he thought of me right off because I was so convenient on account of being Grandfather's heiress and their owning everything together. Grandfather didn't mind his marrying me, only he said that I must not be taken out of boarding school until I was 18. So it was all arranged, and they came together and saw me, and then all the property was deeded to Grandfather to hold in trust. And after that, I was married at their hotel, and they returned directly to the city that very afternoon. I went back to school with the history teacher who had come in with me. And we had to tell the principal, of course. She didn't like it at all, and she blamed Grandfather terribly. I had to go to my room early to make up for the time that I had lost while I was being married, and when the telegram came about the 3rd fit of apoplexy, it was too hot going back on the train, and that gave it to him. She never sent me any word. But next day, everyone knew, and in the end, I had to leave school. It seems they won't have a married woman in boarding school, no matter how soon her husband dies. What became of you then? Asked Mowbray with unaffected curiosity. Grandfather sent me abroad, and I came back perfectly sensible. A wonderful story. What? That I came back sensible? He laughed. No, the whole of it together. It is funny, isn't it? The most curious thing about it is that you failed to marry some prince or duke while abroad. I never wanted to marry anyone. Never then, anyhow. Mrs. Dupre rose. Natalie, she said imperatively, the hour is up. No, not for 2 minutes. The younger woman turned her eyes to the officer again. My grandfather is dead too now, she said, and do you know what I think that I should like to do? No, what? I should like to take some of all those millions and help do a great good with it. Something like passing your bill and making life easier for all those men and their wives and their children. He was deeply touched by her sweetness. "Heaven bless you for the wish," he said heartily, "but I fear that my bill is not the kind that can be put through in that way. I mustn't comment on your views as to political ways and means of passing bills, because I shall have to set against them the other backdoor bit of wisdom, which forces me to point out to you that my bill was foreordained to its fate by the fact that it was drawn up to benefit those who have neither votes nor money, and are the kind that may be counted on to bear with grit whatever comes to them, even when they know that it is unfair and unjust." She listened with deep attention. "I had no idea that things were so bad," she said. "I have been reading all about the labor trouble, but I never realized that the government didn't pay people properly. I thought that it was only shirtmen and coalmen who did such things." Mowbray began to laugh. "Oh, the army isn't based on the sweat system," he said. "I didn't mean to paint things as black as that. It really isn't bad at all if one does not wish to marry. But so many people always do wish to marry. You know how they arrange it in Germany. The officers are not allowed to marry there unless the girl has money enough for an income." Mowbray laughed again. "I should not be the less a bachelor then," he declared. "Wouldn't you marry a woman with a fortune, if she loved you?" She lifted up her head and looked straight at him as she put the question. "The hour is striking!" exclaimed Mrs. Dupre. "I would not consider the idea for 1 minute," he replied firmly. As the words left his lips, he felt himself stabbed, in a curious, sickening way, by the sight of a sort of helpless pain in her eyes. But it was gone almost at once, and she stood up and smiled brightly. "I am going to do something, somehow," she announced. "I feel inside myself that you must have your salary raised. It isn't right for any man to feel the way that you feel about marriage." Then she went out. End of chapter 5.